A father shot, a mother stabbed, one son standing at the center of it all. Collin Griffith was just 16 years old when he pulled the trigger, killing his father in Oklahoma. Self-defense, the authorities ruled. A tragic end to what was described as a troubled family dynamic. The case was closed. No charges. No trial. Life was supposed to go on. But then, less than a year later, another tragedy. This time in Florida. His mother, Collin Griffith, lay lifeless. A knife wound. A struggle, he claimed. She fell on the blade, he insisted. But the evidence? It didn't quite match his words. The injuries raised questions. The details murky. Collin stood trial for murder and kidnapping. His defense? Self-defense. Again. And just like before, he walked free. 2 deaths. 2 parents. 2 times. A jury let him go. Was Collin Griffith the unluckiest teenager in America, twice forced to defend himself against his own parents? Or was something else at play? A pattern hidden in plain sight? A story that didn't quite fit? Welcome to True Crime Files, where we uncover the most shocking and complex criminal cases, peeling back every layer to expose the truth. If you have a mind for mystery and a curiosity for justice, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. There's always more to the story than what's written in the headlines, and we bring you the details that others might miss. Today, we examine a case that has left many questioning the very definition of justice. A case that, on the surface, appears to be about a young man fighting for his life. A boy who found himself in the most unimaginable circumstances, not once but twice. Tonight, we pull apart the facts. We break down what happened. We examine the inconsistencies, the questions left unanswered, because sometimes the truth is not what it seems. In 2023, a call came through to 911 in Oklahoma. The voice on the other end was young, urgent, shaken but controlled. The caller was 16-year-old Collin Griffith. His message was clear. His father was dead. Shot. When authorities arrived, they found a disturbing scene. A father, lifeless. A son standing over him. A gun. A claim of self-defense. Collin told investigators that his father had been aggressive, that there had been an argument. He said he had no choice, that it was either his father or him. The evidence, at least on the surface, seemed to support his version of events. There were no other witnesses, no security footage, no neighbors who saw what happened, just Collin's word and the body of a man who could no longer speak for himself. Authorities reviewed the case, weighed the details, and in the end, they did not press charges. They called it justified, a closed case, a tragic, unfortunate event, a young boy forced to defend himself. Collin was allowed to move on, to rebuild, to start over. No criminal record, no time behind bars. But something about the case didn't sit right with everyone. The argument that led to the shooting. What exactly was it about? What had pushed things to the point of no return? The details were scarce. And then there was the shooting itself. The angle of the gunshot. The lack of defensive wounds on Collin. The way he was able to take control so quickly after the shooting. Still, there was no concrete evidence to challenge his claim. The law had spoken. And for a while, it seemed like this chapter of Collin's life was over. In 2024, another emergency call, another panicked voice, another parent gone. This time, it was Collin's mother, Collin Griffith. She was found dead in their home, a knife wound in her body. Her son, once again, the only witness, the only survivor, the only one left to tell the story of what happened that night. And his story, a struggle, an argument. He said his mother came at him, that he tried to push her away, that in the chaos, she fell onto the blade. A freak accident, he claimed, a moment of fear and miscalculation. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think Collin Griffith is truly innocent, or did he manipulate the system? Drop your theories in the comments below. But was it really that simple? The medical examiner wasn't convinced. The wounds on Catherine's body didn't match a fall. The placement, the depth, the trajectory, none of it lined up with an accident. There were no signs that she had fallen with the force necessary to inflict such a fatal injury. No bruises suggesting she had stumbled or tripped. No defensive wounds on Collin indicating that he had tried to protect himself from an attack. And then there was a timeline. The gaps in Collin's account of what led up to that moment. The things that didn't add up. The inconsistencies between his initial statement to the police and what he later said in court. If his mother had been attacking him, why wasn't there evidence of a struggle? If he had been pushed to the point of defending himself, why were there no clear signs of self-defense? If she had fallen, why was the knife wound at an angle that suggested deliberate force rather than an accidental impact? Investigators started asking questions. Prosecutors built their case. The inconsistencies, the details that didn't fit, the fact that this was the second time a parent had died under Collin's watch. They charged him with murder. They charged him with kidnapping. They prepared to argue that this was no accident, no tragic case of self-defense, but something else entirely. And yet, when the trial began, the defense countered with a different story. One of fear, one of a troubled relationship between a mother and son. They painted Collin Griffith as volatile, unstable. They said Collin had been forced to defend himself, just like he had been with his father. They pointed to his past. A boy who had already survived one deadly encounter with a parent. Was it really so hard to believe he had survived another? The jury listened. They weighed the arguments, the evidence, the testimonies. They deliberated, and in the end, they acquitted him. No guilty verdict. No prison sentence. No justice for Collin Griffith, at least not in the eyes of those who believe Collin's story didn't hold up. But being found not guilty isn't the same as being innocent. The law deals in evidence, in reasonable doubt. But outside the courtroom, people looked at the facts and saw something else. A pattern, a history of violence in a home where Collin was always the last one standing. 2 parents, 2 deaths. 2 times he walked away free. The question remains, did the justice system fail? Did the courts let a killer slip through their fingers? Or was Collin Griffith truly a boy caught in the most tragic of circumstances, twice forced to defend his own life? Some believed his story. Others never did. But the truth? The truth died with his parents. And now, only Collin Griffith knows what really happened. Narrator, 2 parents, 2 deaths. Both cases ruled as self-defense. What are the odds? How does a teenager find himself in life or death situations? Twice? How does a father end up shot and a mother end up stabbed? Both in separate states, both in different years, both with the same son as the only survivor. The law accepted Collin's story. Once in Oklahoma, then again in Florida. 2 juries, 2 acquittals, 2 cases closed. But outside the courtroom, people weren't convinced. The circumstances were too similar. The timing, too close. The explanations, too fragile. The only common factor was Collin Griffith. His father's death was explained as an act of protection. His mother's, a tragic accident. But how do accidents follow the same person twice? How does a son who once stood over his father's lifeless body, gun in hand, later stand over his mother's, this time with a knife? Both deaths were acts of violence. One with a firearm, one with a blade. The weapons changed, but the result was the same. Collin lived and his parents did not. Those who believe in his innocence argue that he was a victim of abuse, that both parents, at different points in his life, forced him into situations where he had no choice. They see a teenager who was pushed to the edge, someone who acted only out of desperation. But others see something very different. They see a boy who got away with it, someone who knew how to tell the right story at the right time, to the right people. They point to the gaps, the details that didn't fit, the forensic evidence that contradicted his words. They ask how a mother could have fallen onto a knife in a way that caused a fatal wound. They ask why a father, in the heat of an argument, ended up dead from a gunshot. They ask how Collin, in both cases, walked away without a scratch. The law needs evidence. It needs proof beyond a reasonable doubt. The juries in both cases believe there wasn't enough to convict. But does lack of proof mean a lack of guilt? Collin Griffith is a free man. He will not serve time for his father's death. He will not serve time for his mother's. The courts have spoken. The papers have been signed. The cases have been closed. But even as he walks away from the courtroom, the questions remain. Is Collin Griffith a young man who survived 2 tragic encounters? Or is he someone who left no witnesses behind? Some people believe his story. Others never will. And the truth? The truth now belongs to Collin. And Collin alone. Don't forget, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a case that'll keep you up at night.